You know that moment when everything you thought you knew about your life shatters like glass hitting concrete, when the people you trusted most become strangers wearing familiar faces, when your own birthday party becomes the scene of your potential murder. I am 80 years old today, and I just watched my son collapse on the floor after drinking from the wine glass that was meant for me. The wine glass I switched with his when he was not looking. The wine glass he had spiked with something. That was supposed to end my life on this day. That should have been a celebration. My hands are still trembling as I stand here in my living room, surrounded by decorations and half-eaten cake, watching the man I gave birth to convulsing on my Persian rug, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth, his eyes rolling back in a way that tells me whatever he put in, that wine was not meant to make me sleep peacefully. My name is Dorothy, and I have Alzheimer's disease. But in this moment, my mind is clearer than it has been in months, sharp as broken glass, focused entirely on the horrifying truth that my own child just tried to kill me. They say Alzheimer's steals your memories, turns your mind into a fog where nothing makes sense anymore, where you forget the names of people you have loved your whole life, where you wake up in your own bedroom and do not recognize the walls around you. But what they do not tell you is that sometimes, in moments of extreme stress or danger, the fog lifts completely, and you see everything with a clarity that is almost painful in its precision. That is what is happening to me right now as I watch my son David writhing on the floor, his expensive suit getting ruined by his own saliva, his face turning colors that no living person's face should turn. I should call an ambulance. I should do something to help him, but I cannot move because my brain is processing information faster than it has in years, connecting dots that I had missed, remembering conversations that had seemed innocent at the time, but now reveal themselves as planning sessions for my murder. The party started 3 hours ago, when David and his wife Margaret arrived with their arms full of presents and their faces full of smiles that did not quite reach their eyes. My daughter Linda came too, with her husband Robert and their teenage son Michael, and for a while it felt like a real family gathering, the kind I used to host before my diagnosis, before everything started falling apart. They decorated my house with balloons and streamers, hung a banner that said, "Happy 80th birthday Grandma" across the fireplace, arranged platters of food on the dining room table that I did not remember buying. Margaret kept touching my arm and speaking to me slowly, like I was a child who might not understand normal conversation, asking me if I recognized everyone, if I knew where I was, if I remembered it was my birthday. I hated the way she talked to me, but I smiled and nodded because that is what you do when you have this disease. You play along. You pretend everything is fine, even when you can feel your mind slipping away from you like sand through your fingers. But then David pulled me aside into the kitchen, away from the others, and he poured 2 glasses of wine from a bottle he said he had brought specially for me, an expensive vintage that he claimed was my favorite, even though I could not remember ever having a favorite wine. He was talking fast, his words tumbling over each other in a way that should have warned me something was wrong, telling me how much he loved me, how hard it had been watching me decline, how he wanted this birthday to be special, how he had been thinking about my future and what was best for me. He handed me one of the wine glasses, kept the other for himself, and suggested we make a toast before rejoining the party. That was when I noticed his hand shaking slightly as he held his glass, noticed the way his eyes kept darting toward mine, noticed something in his expression that looked almost like guilt mixed with determination. My foggy brain registered that something felt off about this moment, but I could not put my finger on exactly what was wrong. Before we could drink, Margaret called from the living room that it was time to cut the cake, and David's face flashed with frustration so quick I almost missed it. He set both wine glasses on the kitchen counter and told me to wait there, said we would make our special toast after the cake, then he rushed out to help his wife with something. I stood alone in my kitchen holding my wine glass, looking down at the dark red liquid, and that is when it happened. That is when my Alzheimer's riddled brain did something it has not done in months. It showed me a memory, crystal clear and sharp-edged, of David standing in almost this exact spot 2 weeks ago, talking on his phone to someone, his voice low and urgent, saying words that did not make sense to me at the time but now suddenly arranged themselves into a horrifying pattern. "I need it to look natural," he had said. "I cannot do this anymore." Watching her fade away, draining everything we should inherit. The nursing home costs alone are going to bankrupt us. It needs to happen soon, before she changes the will again. If you have ever watched someone you love slip away into the fog of Alzheimer's, if you have ever felt the helplessness of seeing them forget your name, forget your face, forget every moment you shared together, If you have ever had to make impossible decisions about their care while watching your inheritance disappear into medical bills and full-time nursing, if you have ever felt the terrible guilt of resenting them for still being alive when they are already so far gone, then you understand something of what my son must have been feeling. But you also know that no matter how hard it gets, no matter how much it costs, or how painful it is to watch, you do not solve that problem by putting poison in your mother's wine on her 80th birthday. I need you to do something for me right now, something important. I need you to write in the comments, "I see you. I understand. You are not alone in this journey." Write those exact words if this story is touching something deep inside you, if you recognize the pain of watching someone disappear while they are still breathing, if you have ever felt alone in dealing with this devastating disease. Your comment will help others who are watching this right now feel less isolated in their struggle. We'll let them know there is a community here that understands what they are going through. Please, take a moment and write those words in the comments. I see you. I understand. You are not alone in this journey. Let us build something beautiful together, even in the midst of all this heartbreak. Standing in my kitchen with that memory burning bright in my confused mind, I looked at the 2 wine glasses on the counter and made a decision that probably saved my life. My hands moved almost without my conscious control, switching the glasses while David was still in the living room, putting the one he had given me in the spot where his had been, putting his in the place where mine should be. I did not know for certain that he had poisoned my wine. My logical brain told me I was being paranoid, told me that Alzheimer's makes you suspicious and confused, told me I was probably misremembering that phone conversation or misunderstanding what I had heard. But some deeper instinct, some part of me that still knew how to protect myself even when my memory was failing, told me to make that switch. So I did. I switched the glasses, and I waited. When David came back into the kitchen a few minutes later, he was smiling that smile that had always charmed everyone, the smile I remembered from when he was a little boy asking for extra dessert or permission to stay up late. He picked up what he thought was his glass, the one that was actually mine now, and handed me what he thought was my poisoned glass, which was actually his original one. He raised his glass high and looked me in the eyes and said, "To you, Mom, to 80 beautiful years and to the peace you deserve." I want you to think about that toast for a moment. To the peace you deserve. What kind of peace was he offering me? The permanent kind. The kind you do not wake up from. The kind that would solve all his financial problems and free him from the burden of a mother whose mind was slipping away. I raised my glass to meet his, and we both drank. The wine tasted normal to me, fruity and slightly bitter in the way red wine always is, nothing strange or chemical about it. David drained his glass in 3 large gulps, like he was nervous and trying to get through this moment as quickly as possible, while I took small sips, watching him over the rim of my glass. For a few minutes, nothing happened. We walked back into the living room together, and I blew out the candles on my cake. 80 small flames that took me 3 attempts to extinguish because my breath is not what it used to be. Everyone sang happy birthday in voices that blended together into a wall of sound that made my head hurt. Linda cut the cake into neat slices and served them on paper plates with pink napkins that had 80 years young printed on them in silver letters. Margaret took pictures with her phone, making me pose with different family members, adjusting my cardigan, smoothing my hair, treating me like a doll she was arranging for display. That is when David's face changed. It happened slowly at first, a slight tightening around his eyes, a faint sheen of sweat appearing on his forehead, even though the room was not particularly warm. He sat down heavily in my favorite armchair, the one his father used to sit in before he passed away 12 years ago, and I saw him grip the armrests like he needed them to keep from falling. Margaret noticed too. She asked him if he was feeling all right, and he said yes, but his voice came out wrong, strained and thin. Linda stopped cutting cake and turned to look at her brother, concern spreading across her face like ripples in water. David tried to stand up, but his legs would not hold him, and he crashed back down into the chair with enough force to make it slide backward across the hardwood floor. What happened next unfolded in slow motion, even though it probably only took a few seconds. David's face went from pale to gray to almost blue. His breathing turned into gasping, desperate pulls of air that did not seem to make it all the way into his lungs. His hands started shaking violently, then his arms, then his whole body seized up like he was being electrocuted from the inside. He tumbled out of the chair onto the floor, his head hitting the corner of the coffee table on the way down with a sound that made everyone scream. Foam started coming out of his mouth, white and frothy like soap bubbles, and his eyes rolled back until only the whites showed. Margaret was screaming his name over and over, dropping to her knees beside him, trying to hold him still, but he was convulsing too hard. Linda grabbed her phone to call 911, her hand shaking so badly she kept dropping it. Robert pulled young Michael behind him, trying to shield the boy from seeing his uncle dying on the living room floor. And I just stood there, holding my paper plate with its untouched slice of birthday cake, watching my son die from the poison he had meant for me. You need to understand something about Alzheimer's that most people do not realize until they experience it themselves or watch someone close to them go through it. The disease does not take everything at once. It works in layers, stripping away your recent memories first, making you forget what you had for breakfast or whether you took your medication or what day of the week it is. But the older memories, the ones burned deep into your brain from decades of repetition and emotion, those sometimes stay intact even when everything else is crumbling. And in moments of crisis, when your body floods with adrenaline and your survival instincts kick in, sometimes those old neural pathways light up again, and you get these windows of clarity where suddenly you remember everything, understand everything, see all the connections your confused mind had been missing. That is what was happening to me as I watched the paramedics work on David's seizing body, pumping his chest, forcing air into his lungs, loading him onto a stretcher with such urgency that they knocked over my birthday decorations. My mind was racing through years of memories, seeing them all in a new context, understanding finally what had been happening in my family while I was too lost in the fog to notice. I remembered David visiting me 6 months ago, sitting at my kitchen table with papers spread out in front of him, papers he said were just updates to my will to make sure everything was in order. I had signed them because I trusted him, because he was my son, and sons are supposed to take care of their aging mothers, because my brain was too tired to read through all the legal language and understand what I was agreeing to. I remembered him asking me questions about my assets, about the house that had been in our family for 40 years, about my savings accounts and investment portfolios, writing down numbers in a leather notebook he always carried. I remembered the way his eyes had gleamed when I told him the approximate value of everything, the way he had hugged me extra tight when he left that day, the way he had said, "Do not worry about anything, Mom. I am taking care of everything for you." I remembered Margaret pulling me aside at Thanksgiving dinner, her voice honey-sweet but her words sharp underneath, suggesting that I really should consider moving into a care facility where professionals could watch me all the time, where I would not be a burden on my children, where I would be safe from hurting myself in my own confusion. I remembered Linda arguing with her, saying I was not that far gone yet, saying I deserved to stay in my own home as long as possible, and the look that passed between David and Margaret, a look that said Linda did not understand the financial realities they were facing. I remembered David bringing up the care facility again and again over the following months, each time with more urgency, more insistence that it was for my own good, more details about how expensive it would be, more heavy sighs about the sacrifice he was making to ensure I got the best possible care. I remembered waking up one night 3 weeks ago to find David in my bedroom, standing over me in the darkness, just standing there and watching me sleep. When I asked him what he was doing, he jumped like I had caught him doing something wrong, then laughed it off and said he had heard a noise and come to check on me, wanted to make sure I was safe. But the way he had been looking at me in that moment before I spoke, the expression on his face that I could just barely make out in the moonlight coming through my curtains, that was not the face of a concerned son. That was the face of someone calculating, measuring, weighing options and outcomes. I did not understand it then. My confused brain accepted his explanation and went back to sleep. But now I understand perfectly. He was trying to work up the courage to do it that night, to put a pillow over my face or slip something into my bedside water glass, to end this problem quietly in the dark, where no one would ever know it was anything but a natural death for a sick old woman. The memories kept coming, faster and faster, an avalanche of moments I had forgotten or not understood, all of them adding up to the same terrible truth. My son had been planning to kill me for months. He had been patient, careful, waiting for the right opportunity, the right method, something that would not raise suspicion, something that could be blamed on my failing health or my confused mind. A birthday party was perfect. Everyone would be there, witnesses to see me drinking and celebrating, enjoying my special day right up until the moment I suddenly collapsed. The wine could be blamed. Bad reaction to my medications mixed with alcohol happens all the time with elderly patients. Or maybe he would have said I must have taken the wrong pills in my confusion, overdosed myself accidentally. Tragic, but not unexpected for someone in my condition. No one would have investigated too closely. No one would have suspected my devoted son who had been taking such good care of me, handling all my finances, making sure I had everything I needed, sacrificing his own comfort to ensure his mother's final years were as peaceful as possible. The ambulance took David away with sirens screaming, red and blue lights painting my house in colors that reminded me of fireworks, of celebrations, of 4th of July parties from decades ago, when my children were small and the future felt full of promise instead of poison. Margaret rode with him, her face frozen in shock, not even looking back at me as they loaded her husband into the vehicle. Linda stayed with me, holding my hand, asking me over and over if I was okay, if I understood what had happened, if I needed anything. Robert called his mother to come pick up Michael because no child should have to process what he had just witnessed, and I sat on my couch in my party hat that someone had put on my head earlier, surrounded by birthday decorations and half-eaten cake, trying to decide whether to tell them the truth about what I had done. Because here is what I have not told you yet, what I have been building up to this whole time, the part of the story that changes everything you think you know about what happened in my living room today. When I switched those wine glasses in the kitchen, when I gave David the poisoned drink that was meant for me, I knew exactly what I was doing. My Alzheimer's riddled brain might forget what day it is, might forget whether I have eaten lunch, might forget the names of my grandchildren sometimes, but in that crystal clear moment of memory and understanding, I knew with absolute certainty that my son was trying to kill me, and I made the conscious choice to let him drink his own poison. I am not innocent in this. I am not just a confused old woman who got lucky with a random glass switch. I murdered my son just as surely as if I had put the poison in his drink myself. I watched him pick up that glass, watched him raise it to his lips, watched him swallow the substance meant to end my life, and I did not say a word to stop him. I let it happen. I wanted it to happen. Does that make me a monster? Does that make me worse than him? He was going to kill me for money, for freedom from the burden of my care, for the chance to inherit my house and my savings while he was still young enough to enjoy them. I killed him in self-defense, to protect my own life, because what else could I do? Call the police and tell them my son was trying to poison me based on a memory I had that might not even be real, based on a phone conversation I might have misunderstood, based on the paranoid suspicions of a woman whose brain is literally deteriorating. They would have patted my hand and told me I was confused, would have probably suggested to David that maybe it really was time for that care facility after all, would have left me alone with him to finish what he started. So I made a choice in that kitchen, and now my son is either dead or dying, and I have to live with what I have done for however many confused days or months or years I have left. Linda is crying now, soft sobs that shake her shoulders as she sits next to me on the couch. She keeps saying she does not understand. How could this happen? David seemed fine just a few minutes ago. What could have caused such a sudden and violent reaction? I could tell her. I could explain about the switched glasses, about the poison meant for me, about her brother's plans to murder me for my inheritance. But would she believe me? Would anyone believe the word of an Alzheimer's patient over the memory of her devoted brother, who was always so good to his mother, who was just trying to make her 80th birthday special? And even if they did believe me, even if they investigated and found evidence of the poison, found proof that David had purchased it or planned this, would that really make things better? Would it bring him back? Would it undo what I did? Would it erase the image of my son, convulsing on my living room floor, foam gathering at his mouth, his eyes rolling back in his head? This is what living with Alzheimer's feels like, but magnified 1,000 times by what has just happened. It is the constant uncertainty about your own mind, about whether what you remember is real or invented, about whether your decisions make sense or are just the confused impulses of a brain that is breaking down. It is the fear that you are losing yourself piece by piece, that soon there will be nothing left of the person you used to be, just a shell that looks like you but cannot remember your children's names or recognize your own face in the mirror. It is the guilt of being a burden on the people who love you, of watching your care drain their finances and their energy and their patience, of knowing that somewhere deep down they might be wishing you would just die already and free them from this endless nightmare. And now, layered on top of all that, is the knowledge that my son felt that wish strongly enough to act on it, and the knowledge that I killed him for it, and the knowledge that I am not sure if I feel guilty or relieved or some twisted combination of both. My phone is ringing. It is Margaret calling from the hospital. I let it ring 4 times before I pick up, because I need those few seconds to decide what kind of person I am going to be when I answer. Whether I am going to be the confused old woman who has no idea what happened, or the clear-minded mother who knows exactly what she did and why. Linda is watching me, waiting to see how I react to whatever news Margaret is about to deliver. I press the phone to my ear, and Margaret's voice comes through, broken and ragged from crying, telling me that David did not make it, that they tried everything but his heart stopped, and they could not bring him back, that he is gone, my son is gone, and she does not understand what happened. The doctors do not understand what happened. They are talking about an autopsy and toxicology reports, and asking her if David had access to any poisons or chemicals, or if he had been depressed lately, or showing any signs of wanting to hurt himself. I make the appropriate sounds of shock and grief. I ask the right questions. I sob into the phone in a way that convinces Linda to take it from me because I am too distraught to continue the conversation. And while my daughter talks to her sister-in-law about funeral arrangements and hospital paperwork and all the practical details that follow a sudden death, I sit very still and very quiet and feel my mind starting to fog over again, feel the clarity that came with the adrenaline beginning to fade, feel myself slipping back into the comfortable confusion where I do not have to think too hard about what I have done, or what it means, or whether I am a murderer, or a victim, or both. Part of me wants to hold on to this lucidity, wants to stay sharp and aware so I can process what happened and decide how I feel about it and figure out what comes next. But another part of me, maybe the stronger part, wants to let it go, wants to sink back into the Alzheimer's fog where memories are unreliable and reality is negotiable, and I do not have to carry the full weight of killing my own child. Here is what I need you to understand, what I need you to really hear and take into your heart. This disease is not just about forgetting names or getting confused about what day it is or repeating the same questions over and over. It is about losing your grip on reality itself, about not being able to trust your own mind, about living in a constant state of uncertainty where you cannot be sure if what you remember actually happened or if your brain invented it to fill in the gaps. It is about the people around you slowly losing patience with you, slowly starting to see you as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved, slowly calculating how much your continued existence is costing them in time and money and emotional energy. And sometimes, in the worst cases, it is about realizing that the people you trusted most in the world have decided you would be better off dead, and they might be right. And you have to choose between accepting that fate or fighting back in the only way available to you. I want to talk to those of you who are watching this and dealing with a family member who has Alzheimer's or dementia or any condition that is slowly stealing their mind away from them. I see you. I know how hard this is. I know you are exhausted from the constant care and the repeated conversations, and the fear of what they might do if you leave them alone for even a few minutes. I know you are watching your inheritance disappear into medical bills and care facilities and medications that only slow the decline without stopping it. I know you sometimes lie awake at night wishing it would just be over, wishing they would die peacefully in their sleep so you could grieve and move on instead of being trapped in this endless loop of watching them fade away. Those feelings are normal. Those feelings do not make you a monster. But acting on those feelings, planning to end their life to make yours easier, that is where the line gets crossed. That is where love turns into murder, no matter how you justify it to yourself. And for those of you who have Alzheimer's or dementia or who are in the early stages and terrified of what is coming, I want you to know something important. Your life still has value. Your existence still matters. You are not just a burden or a problem or a drain on resources. You are a person with a lifetime of experiences and relationships and love that does not disappear just because your memory does. You deserve to be cared for with dignity and patience and compassion, no matter how confused you get, no matter how many times you forget your children's names, no matter how expensive your care becomes. You deserve to live out your days surrounded by people who genuinely want you alive, not people who are counting down the days until you are gone so they can inherit your house. The police came about an hour after Margaret's phone call. Two officers in dark blue uniforms with serious faces and notebooks full of questions. They wanted to know about the party, about who was here, about what David ate and drank, about whether he had seemed upset or sick before he collapsed. Linda answered most of their questions while I sat quietly and let my mind wander, let myself slip into the confused elderly woman role that came so naturally now. When they asked me directly what I remembered, I told them it was all a blur, that I had trouble with my memory sometimes, that I was not sure what had happened exactly, but my son had been drinking wine, and then suddenly he was on the floor and everyone was screaming. It was not even really a lie. That was what it looked like from the outside. That was the story everyone else would tell. That was the truth, as far as anyone but me would ever know it. They took the wine bottle from the kitchen, bagged it carefully like evidence in a crime scene, which I suppose it was. They asked if they could take the remaining wine glass too, the one I had drunk from, the one that used to be David's before I switched them. I said yes, of course. Whatever they needed, I wanted to help them understand what happened to my poor boy. Linda gave them David's phone number and address, Margaret's contact information at the hospital, a list of everyone who had been at the party. They thanked us for our cooperation, said they were sorry for our loss, said someone would be in touch about the autopsy results, and then they left, taking with them the evidence of my son's attempted murder and my successful one, evidence they would examine and test and analyze without ever realizing what really happened in my kitchen when I switched those glasses. If you are still watching this, if you have stayed with me through this whole terrible story, then you are part of a community that understands something important about the reality of aging and illness and the dark places families can go when they are pushed to their limits. I do not share this story to shock you, or to make you think less of people caring for elderly relatives, or to suggest that everyone with Alzheimer's is in danger of being murdered by their children. I share it because these conversations need to happen, because we need to talk honestly about the strain that long-term care puts on families, about the resentment that can build up over years of watching someone deteriorate, about the financial devastation that comes with paying for memory care and medications and full-time nursing. We need to talk about it so that families can get help before things reach the breaking point, so that caregivers can admit they are struggling without shame, so that elderly people can feel safe asking for the care they need without feeling like burdens who would be better off dead. This channel exists to tell these stories, to shine light on the experiences of people living with Alzheimer's and the families trying to care for them. Every video I share is meant to make you feel less alone in your struggle, to give you a space where your experiences are validated and understood, to remind you that even in the darkest moments there is still community and connection and hope. If this story touched you, if it made you think about your own situation differently, if it helped you feel seen and heard, then I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel. Not because I need the numbers or the views, but because every person who subscribes becomes part of a family that genuinely cares about these issues, that shows up for each other, that shares resources and support and understanding. When you click that subscribe button, you are saying yes to being part of something bigger than yourself, yes to standing with others who are walking this difficult path, yes to creating a community where people with Alzheimer's and their families can find comfort and truth and solidarity. Please subscribe now. Join us. Let us walk this journey together. The days after David's death blurred together in ways that had nothing to do with my Alzheimer's and everything to do with grief and shock and the surreal feeling of attending your own child's funeral. Margaret planned everything because Linda was too devastated to function and I was supposed to be too confused to help, which was partially true and partially an act I had perfected over years of living with this disease. The service was beautiful in that generic way funerals often are, full of flowers and music and people saying kind things about David that were all true but incomplete, painting him as a devoted son and loving husband without mentioning the part where he tried to murder his mother for inheritance money. I sat in the front row wearing black, holding Linda's hand, crying real tears that came from a complicated mix of grief and guilt and relief and fear. The toxicology report came back 2 weeks later. The police called Linda to tell her that David had high levels of antifreeze in his system, ethylene glycol poisoning that caused acute kidney failure and death. They asked if he had any reason to have antifreeze, if he worked on cars as a hobby, if there was any way he could have ingested it accidentally. Linda said no, David did not work on cars. They did not even keep antifreeze in their garage. Margaret had confirmed that. The police said they were treating it as a suspicious death, possibly suicide, possibly accidental poisoning. They were still investigating. They wanted to interview everyone who had been at the birthday party again, wanted to know if anyone had seen David drinking anything unusual, if he had seemed depressed or suicidal, if there had been any problems in his marriage or his finances that might have pushed him over the edge. During those 2 weeks of waiting for the toxicology results, I lived in a state of suspended animation, caught between the person I had been before my 80th birthday and the person I had become after watching my son die from poison meant for me. Every morning I woke up and had a moment of confusion, not the Alzheimer's kind, but the normal human kind where you forget for just a second that something terrible has happened, and then reality crashes back in like a wave hitting rocks, and you remember everything all over again. I would lie in my bed, the same bed I had shared with my husband for 30 years before cancer took him, the same bed where David had stood watching me sleep just weeks before his death, and I would replay the whole sequence of events in my mind like a movie I could not stop watching. The wine glasses on the counter, the switch, the toast, the collapse, the foam at his mouth, the sirens, the silence that came after. Linda called me every day during those 2 weeks, sometimes twice a day, checking on me, making sure I was eating, making sure I was taking my medications, making sure I had not fallen or gotten confused and wandered outside in my nightgown like she seemed to think Alzheimer's patients did. I let her baby me because it was easier than explaining that I was actually okay, that my mind was clearer than it had been in months, that the supposed Alzheimer's fog had lifted almost completely since that moment of crisis when I switched the glasses. I played the role she needed me to play, the confused elderly mother who needed constant supervision and gentle reminders about basic tasks, because that role protected me from suspicion and kept her from asking questions I did not want to answer. Margaret came to visit me once during those 2 weeks, arriving at my door with red-rimmed eyes and a casserole dish full of something she had made for me, as if food could fill the void her husband's death had created. She sat in my living room, in the chair where David had collapsed, though she did not seem to notice or care about that detail, and she talked for nearly an hour about how much she missed him, how empty their house felt without him, how she kept expecting him to walk through the door any minute. She said the police had been asking her questions about their finances, about whether David had any debts or gambling problems, or reasons to feel desperate. She said she had told them no, everything was fine, they were comfortable, David had a good job and smart investments and no money troubles at all. But the way she said it made me wonder if she was trying to convince herself as much as she was trying to convince the police. I wanted to tell her the truth in that moment. I wanted to explain that her husband had been planning to murder me, that he had poisoned the wine intending it for me, that he died because I was smarter or luckier or more ruthless than he expected. I wanted to see her face when she realized that the man she had been married to for 25 years was capable of matricide, that he had valued money more than his own mother's life, that everything she thought she knew about him was built on a foundation of lies. But I kept quiet, made sympathetic noises, patted her hand with my wrinkled fingers, and let her believe that her husband was a victim of some tragic accident or mysterious poisoning rather than the architect of his own destruction. It was kinder that way, or maybe it was just more convenient for me. I am still not sure which. The nights were the worst part of those 2 weeks. I would lie awake in the darkness, listening to the house settle and creak around me, hearing sounds that might have been footsteps or might have been my imagination, remembering all the times David had visited me over the past year, and wondering how many of those visits had been reconnaissance missions, him studying my routines and my vulnerabilities, planning the best way to end my life without getting caught. I remembered him going through my medicine cabinet one day, claiming he was just making sure I had everything I needed, checking expiration dates, organizing things for me. Had he been looking for something to use? Some medication he could overdose me with? Some combination of pills that would stop my heart while looking like a natural death? I remembered him insisting on having a key to my house, saying it was for emergencies. What if I fell and could not get to the door? What if I had a medical crisis and he needed to get in quickly to help me? Had that really been about helping me? Or had it been about having access to kill me whenever the opportunity arose? These thoughts circled through my mind like vultures, picking at the carcass of my relationship with my son, stripping away the good memories to reveal the skeleton of manipulation and betrayal underneath. I had loved him so completely, so unconditionally, the way mothers do. I had changed his diapers and walked him to his first day of school and taught him to ride a bicycle and helped him with his homework and celebrated his achievements and comforted him through his failures. I had given him life, literally grown him inside my body and pushed him screaming into the world, and he had repaid that gift by trying to end mine. The unfairness of it burned in my chest like acid, made me cry tears that soaked my pillow in the dark, made me question everything I thought I knew about love and family and the bonds between parents and children, but mixed in with the grief and the anger was something else, something darker that I did not want to acknowledge but could not ignore. Relief. A terrible, guilty, shameful relief that he was dead and I was alive, that I would never have to wonder if today was the day he would try again, that I could live out whatever remained of my years without looking over my shoulder for the son who wanted me gone. And underneath even that relief was a twisted kind of pride, a fierce satisfaction that when it came down to it, when it was kill or be killed, I had been the one who survived. My mind might be deteriorating, my body might be failing, but my survival instinct was still sharp enough to save my own life, even if it meant taking his. That realization both horrified and comforted me in equal measure. I submitted to the interview in my living room, the same room where David died, sitting in the same spot on the couch where I had watched him convulse and foam and stop breathing. The detective was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a gentle voice, the kind of person they send to interview confused elderly witnesses who might not remember things clearly. She asked me to walk her through the party again, every detail I could remember. I told her about the decorations and the cake and the presents, about how happy David had seemed, how he had been taking such good care of me since my diagnosis, how he had brought a special bottle of wine just for us to share. She perked up at that, asked me more about the wine, whether I had seen him open it, whether I had drunk any, whether anyone else had drunk from the same bottle. This was the moment. This was where I could tell her the truth, could explain about the switched glasses and the memory of David's phone conversation, and my suspicion that he was trying to kill me. This was where I could clear my own conscience and let justice take its course and admit what I had done. But when I opened my mouth, what came out was confusion and uncertainty, the voice of an old woman whose mind was slipping away, telling the detective that I did not really remember about the wine, that everything from that day was fuzzy now, that sometimes I got mixed up about what happened when, that I was sorry I could not be more helpful. She patted my hand and told me it was okay, told me I was doing great, told me that memory problems were completely understandable given my condition. They closed the investigation a month later, ruling David's death as accidental poisoning from an unknown source, unable to determine how the antifreeze got into his system, but finding no evidence of foul play or suicide. Margaret received a substantial life insurance payout. Linda inherited half of David's estate, and I continued living in my house, alone now except for the home health aide that Linda insisted on hiring to check on me 3 times a week. My Alzheimer's progressing slowly but steadily, my moments of clarity becoming rarer and shorter, my grip on what really happened that day at my birthday party loosening like everything else in my deteriorating mind. But here is the final twist, the thing I have been holding back, the revelation that changes everything you think you understand about this story. 3 months after David's funeral, I was going through some boxes in my attic, looking for old photo albums that Linda wanted to show her son, when I found a folder of medical records that I did not remember putting there. Inside were documents from my doctor, test results and consultation notes, and a letter addressed to David that had been opened and read. The letter was dated 8 months ago, before any of this started, and it contained the results of my latest cognitive assessment. According to my doctor's careful and detailed evaluation, I did not have Alzheimer's disease. I had never had Alzheimer's disease. What I had was something called mild cognitive impairment, a condition that causes some memory problems and confusion, but is not progressive, not degenerative, not the devastating brain-destroying illness that Alzheimer's is. The letter explained that the previous diagnosis had been wrong, that new testing had revealed the error, that I should come in for a follow-up appointment to discuss treatment options and prognosis, that with proper care I could expect to maintain my current level of function for many years, possibly decades. I sat on the dusty attic floor with that letter in my shaking hands, reading it over and over again, my mind racing to process what this meant. 8 months ago, David had known for 8 months that I did not have Alzheimer's, that I was not dying slowly from an incurable degenerative disease, that I would likely live for many more years with only minor cognitive issues. 8 months ago, he had received this letter meant for me, this correction of a misdiagnosis that should have been cause for celebration, and instead of sharing that good news with me and the rest of the family, he had hidden it away in a folder in my attic where I would never think to look. He had let me continue believing I had Alzheimer's. He had encouraged that belief. He had treated me like someone whose mind was slipping away beyond recovery, had spoken to me in that slow, careful voice people use with dementia patients, had made decisions for me based on the assumption that I would only get worse. The cruelty of it took my breath away. To let your mother believe she is losing herself to one of the most feared diseases in existence, to watch her grieve for the person she is becoming, to see the fear in her eyes every time she forgets something and thinks it is one more step toward complete mental dissolution, to allow all of that suffering when you know the truth is so much less dire, that takes a special kind of heartlessness. But the strategic brilliance of it also became clear as I sat there piecing together his plan. A mother with mild cognitive impairment is not a compelling victim. She can live independently for years, does not need expensive round-the-clock care, does not drain the family finances, does not inspire the kind of sympathetic understanding that makes people nod and say yes. It really would be a mercy if she just passed peacefully in her sleep. But a mother with Alzheimer's, especially one who has been led to believe she is in rapid decline, that mother is a different story entirely. That mother is a tragedy waiting to end, a burden everyone expects to become heavier with each passing month, a person whose death at 80 would be sad but not shocking, whose passing might even be greeted with a quiet relief disguised as grief. David had needed me to have Alzheimer's for his plan to work. He needed the family and the doctors and the police and everyone else to see me as someone whose mind was already mostly gone, whose death would be a release from suffering, whose confusion and memory problems would make me an unreliable witness to my own attempted murder. By hiding that letter, by maintaining the false diagnosis, he had created the perfect conditions for killing me without consequence. And in a twist of cosmic irony that would be funny if it were not so tragic, his lie had also created the perfect cover for me to kill him. Because everyone believed I had Alzheimer's, everyone assumed my actions on that birthday were driven by confusion and faulty memory, everyone accepted my story about not really remembering what happened because that is what Alzheimer's patients do. They forget. They get confused. They cannot be held responsible for their actions because their minds are broken. Except my mind was not broken, not in the way everyone thought. I had some memory issues, yes. I forgot names sometimes, lost track of conversations, struggled with complex tasks that used to be easy for me, but I was not disappearing into a fog of complete dementia. I was not on an inevitable slide toward not recognizing my own children, or forgetting how to dress myself, or losing the ability to form new memories entirely. I was just an 80-year-old woman with normal age-related cognitive decline, plus a little extra difficulty from a specific condition that had a name and a prognosis and a treatment plan I had never been given the chance to follow because my son had hidden the truth from me. David had intercepted this letter. He had read it and hidden it, and never told me about the corrected diagnosis. He had let me go on believing I had Alzheimer's, had encouraged that belief, had treated me like I was sicker than I really was, had convinced the whole family that I was deteriorating rapidly when in fact I was relatively stable. And I understood why. Because a mother with mild cognitive impairment might live for 20 more years, might never need expensive memory care, might never become the helpless burden he was preparing everyone to accept. But a mother with Alzheimer's, a mother who was clearly declining, a mother who might not even remember her own children's names soon, that mother could die at her 80th birthday party from a poisoned glass of wine and no one would be too surprised. No one would investigate too hard. No one would suspect her devoted son of anything but trying to make her final celebration special. So when I switched those glasses in the kitchen, when I gave David the poisoned wine that was meant for me, when I watched him die on my living room floor, I was not a confused Alzheimer's patient acting on paranoid suspicions. I was a woman with mild cognitive impairment who had found evidence of her son's murder plot and made a calculated decision to kill him first. I was completely aware of what I was doing. I understood the consequences. I chose his death over mine with full knowledge and intent, and then I used the Alzheimer's diagnosis that he had hidden from me as the perfect cover for my actions, playing the confused old woman so convincingly that no one ever suspected the truth. I still have moments of confusion, still forget things sometimes, still struggle with complex tasks and new information in ways that frustrate me, but I am not disappearing into the fog. I am not losing myself piece by piece. I am just getting older, dealing with the normal cognitive changes that come with age, plus a little extra difficulty from my condition, but nothing like the devastating progression I thought I was facing. David's lie gave him a motive for murder, and it gave me the perfect disguise for mine. The irony is so sharp it could cut glass. Do I regret what I did? I have asked myself that question 1,000 times in the months since his death, turning it over in my mind during the long nights when sleep will not come, examining it from every angle like a jeweler studying a diamond for flaws. The answer is complicated. I regret that my son became the kind of person who would try to murder his mother for money. I regret that I had to choose between my life and his. I regret that Linda lost her brother, and Margaret lost her husband, and young Michael lost his uncle. I regret the lie I am living every day, pretending to be sicker than I am, pretending not to remember what really happened. But do I regret saving my own life? Do I regret stopping him from poisoning me? Do I regret making sure he could never try again? No, I do not regret that. I would make the same choice again if I had to, would switch those glasses again, would watch him drink his own poison again, would let him die on my living room floor again. Because in the end, it came down to him or me, and I chose me. The weight of keeping this secret grows heavier with each day that passes. Sometimes I catch myself about to confess, the words forming on my tongue when Linda visits, or when I am talking to my priest, or when I am alone at night speaking to the photograph of my late husband that sits on my nightstand. I imagine telling him the whole story, imagine his reaction, wonder if he would understand or if he would be horrified by what I have become. My husband was a good man, honest and straightforward, the kind of person who returned extra change when a cashier made a mistake, and who never told lies even when the truth was inconvenient. What would he think of me now, living this elaborate deception, letting everyone believe I have a disease I do not have, carrying the secret of our son's attempted murder and my successful one? But then, I remember that my husband is dead and has been for 12 years, that he is beyond judgment and beyond caring about earthly matters like whether his widow is a killer or a victim or both. I remember that the only opinions that matter are those of the living, and the living all believe the story I have told them, except the version of events where confused elderly Dorothy with her failing memory had nothing to do with David's tragic death from mysterious poisoning. They look at me with pity and concern, treat me gently like something fragile that might break at any moment, never suspecting that underneath the confused old woman exterior is someone who made a cold, calculated decision to end her own child's life and has the clarity of mind to feel guilty about it. There are moments when I almost break, when the burden of the secret feels like it will crush me under its weight. Like the time Linda found me crying in my kitchen 3 months after the funeral and asked what was wrong, and I almost told her everything, almost unburdened myself of the whole terrible truth. But I looked at her concerned face, saw how much she had aged in the months since losing her brother, noticed the new lines around her eyes and the gray in her hair that seemed to have appeared overnight, and I could not do it. I could not add to her grief by telling her that David was a would-be murderer, and I was an actual one. So I said I was just having a bad day, missing David, forgetting things more than usual. She hugged me and made me tea and sat with me for an hour talking about happy memories of her brother as a child, stories that made me smile even as they broke my heart because they were about a different David, the boy who became the man who tried to kill me. Or the time Margaret invited me to lunch 6 months after David's death and spent the whole meal talking about how she had been going to therapy to process her grief, how the therapist said she needed to find meaning in the tragedy, how she had decided to start a foundation in David's name to fund research into mysterious poisoning cases and help other families get answers when their loved ones died from unknown causes. She asked if I would be willing to be on the board of directors, said my perspective as David's mother would be valuable, said it would be a way to honor his memory and turn this terrible loss into something positive. I sat across from her picking at my salad and nodding in all the right places while internally screaming at the irony, knowing there was nothing mysterious about David's poisoning, knowing exactly how that antifreeze got into his system, knowing the foundation she wanted to create was built on a lie. I told her I would think about it, that my cognitive issues made it hard for me to take on big responsibilities, and she patted my hand understandingly and said, of course, she should have thought of that. She was not trying to pressure me. The relief I felt when that lunch ended was so intense it made me dizzy. Living with what I know, with what I did, with the performance I have to maintain every single day, it changes you in ways that are hard to describe. I find myself watching crime shows on television with a different perspective now, noticing when detectives miss obvious clues, criticizing their investigative techniques, thinking about how I would have done things differently if I had been trying to commit the perfect murder instead of just defending myself in a moment of crisis. I read news articles about elderly people being taken advantage of by their adult children, and I feel a fierce protective anger on their behalf, want to reach through the screen and warn them to be careful, to trust their instincts, to remember that even your own children can become monsters when money is involved. I see other women my age struggling with memory issues and cognitive decline, and I want to tell them to verify their diagnoses, get second opinions, make sure someone is not lying to them about how sick they really are. But mostly I just exist in this strange in-between state, not quite the person I was before my 80th birthday, but not quite the person everyone thinks I am either. I go to my doctor appointments and pretend to be more confused than I am. I let Linda manage my finances because that is what she expects, even though I understand money perfectly well and could handle my own affairs. I attend a support group for Alzheimer's patients and their families, sitting in a circle of folding chairs in a church basement, listening to other people talk about their struggles with the disease I do not actually have, feeling like a fraud, but also feeling strangely connected to them because we are all dealing with the fear of losing ourselves, just in different ways. This is the reality of what can happen when families are pushed to their breaking points by the strain of long-term care, when financial pressures override love and compassion, when people start seeing their elderly relatives as problems to be solved rather than people to be cherished. This is what happens when someone decides that murder is easier than patience, that inheritance is worth more than a mother's life, that ending someone's suffering without their consent is a kindness rather than a crime. And this is what happens when that mother fights back with the only weapons available to her, when she refuses to go quietly into that good night, when she chooses survival over surrender, even if it means becoming a killer herself. I am 80 years old, living alone in my house with my hidden medical records and my guilty conscience, and my slowly declining but not rapidly deteriorating mind. I am a murderer who will never be caught because I hid behind a diagnosis my victim gave me. I am a mother who killed her son in self-defense and has to live with that for whatever years I have left. I am a woman who understands now that the people you love most can sometimes be the ones most willing to end your life, and that understanding has changed me in ways I am still discovering. Every time Linda visits, every time she holds my hand and tells me she loves me, I wonder if she would feel the same way if she knew what I did to her brother. Every time I catch myself forgetting something, mixing up a date or losing track of a conversation, I wonder if the real Alzheimer's is coming for me anyway, if someday I will forget the truth about what happened and lose myself in a fog that has nothing to do with acting. Every time I look at David's picture on my mantle, frozen forever at 52 years old with that charming smile on his face, I wonder if there was another way this could have ended, some path I did not see where we both could have survived. The house feels different now, emptier somehow, even though I lived alone before all of this happened. I walk through rooms filled with memories that have taken on new meanings, see ghosts in every corner, the kitchen where I switched the glasses, the living room where he died, the attic where I found the truth. Sometimes late at night I hear footsteps that are not there, creaking floorboards that sound like someone walking through the halls. My logical mind knows it is just the house settling, just normal sounds that every old house makes, but another part of me wonders if it is David's ghost, if some part of him remains here in the place where he drew his last breath, if he is watching me and knows what I did and is waiting for the right moment to exact his revenge from beyond the grave. But then I remember the phone conversation I overheard, the wine he poured with shaking hands, the toast he made to the peace I deserved, and I know there was no other way. It was always going to end with one of us dead on that living room floor. He chose to make it a war, and I chose to win it. That is the story of my 80th birthday party, the day my son tried to kill me and died from his own poison instead, the day I became a murderer masquerading as a confused old woman with a disease I do not actually have. That is the truth I am sharing with you now. The truth that will die with me when my time finally comes. The truth that I needed to tell someone, even if that someone is just strangers on the internet watching this video. Thank you for being here, for listening to this whole long, terrible, beautiful, complicated story, for being part of this community where we can talk about the hard things, the dark things, the truths that most people do not want to acknowledge. If this story affected you, if it made you think or feel or question or understand something new, then it served its purpose. We are all just trying to survive in a world that is often cruel and unfair and full of impossible choices. Sometimes survival looks like switching wine glasses at a birthday party. Sometimes it looks like something else entirely. But whatever form it takes, it is our right, our responsibility to ourselves, to choose life when we can, to fight for it when we must, to protect it fiercely against anyone who would take it from us, even if that person is our own child. Remember that. Hold on to it. Live by it. And maybe, just maybe, subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more stories like this one. Stories that tell the truth about aging and illness and family and survival. Stories that do not shy away from the darkness but also do not deny the light. Join us. Be part of this. Let us keep telling these truths together until there are no more truths left to tell.